There is a specific kind of tired that doesn't show up on your face. It doesn't make you look worn down. It doesn't slow your steps or roughen your voice or change the way you hold yourself in a room. From the outside, you look the way you always look, capable, composed, present. You answer when someone needs you. You show up. You handle things. You keep the pieces of your life arranged in a way that looks, to everyone watching, like you have it together. But you know the truth of what happens after. After the call ends and you set the phone down. After the door closes and the performance of okayness finally gets to stop. After everyone else has gotten what they needed from you and you are alone with the particular weight of a life that has asked a great deal of you, and that has not always, not nearly always, given back in equal measure. There is a tired that lives below the surface of capable women, below the surface of women who learned early that strength was the price of survival, below the surface of women who became so good at carrying things that people stopped asking if the carrying was getting heavy. They just kept handing her more. If you know that tired, if you felt something shift in your chest just now, some quiet recognition, then stay with me. Because what I want to tell you today is not a promise dressed up as a psychology video. It is not a reassurance designed to make you feel better for 12 minutes and leave nothing behind. What I want to tell you is something true. Something Carl Jung understood about the nature of love and pain and the particular kind of human being who is drawn, not casually, not superficially, but at the level of the soul, towards someone who is carrying more than they should have to carry alone. There is someone who longs to marry you, not for the reasons most people marry, not for the easy seasons, not for the version of you that has everything managed and nothing messy and no evidence of the cost of being you. They long to marry you because of what they've seen underneath that, because of what they sense is there in the part of you that you don't put on display. And I want to explain to you, carefully, honestly, with the full weight of what Jung actually understood about human psychology, why that longing is real, what it means, and what it will ask of you when it arrives. Jung spent decades studying what he called the process of individuation, the lifelong journey toward becoming fully oneself. Not the self that was shaped by other people's expectations, or by early wounds, or by the careful adaptations we make to survive environments that weren't designed for us, but the real self, the one that exists underneath all of that, the one that persists through everything. And one of the most important things he observed in that work was this: we are not healed in isolation. The human psyche does not complete itself in solitude. It completes itself in relationship, in the particular crucible of being truly known by another person. Not the edited version, not the strong version, not the version that has learned to present itself in ways the world finds acceptable, but the full, complicated, sometimes frightened, sometimes tender, always real version. Most of us have never experienced that. Not fully. We've experienced being appreciated for what we contribute. We've experienced being wanted for how we make someone feel. We've experienced being admired for our capability, our warmth, our resilience, the way we show up for people even when we're running on empty. But being truly known, being seen in the places we've kept carefully private, that is a rarer thing. And for women who learned early to lead with strength, it can feel almost inaccessible, almost too much to ask for. Because here is the complicated truth about strength. It is both a genuine quality and a learned defense. And sometimes the two become so intertwined that we ourselves can no longer tell where the genuine ends and the protective begins. You became strong because you had to. Because at some point in your life, maybe many points, you discovered that being strong was what kept things from falling apart. Maybe it was your family that needed you to hold it together. Maybe it was a relationship where the emotional labor fell to you by default, where you became the stable one because the alternative was chaos. Maybe it was simply the accumulated experience of discovering that when you showed your softer places to people who weren't ready for them, those softer places got hurt. And so you learned the way all intelligent, perceptive, emotionally aware people learn. You adapted. You became very good at carrying things without making them visible. You became the person in the room who everyone assumes is fine because you've given them no evidence to the contrary. You became, in Jung's language, masterfully identified with your persona, the face we show the world. And your persona is a genuinely good one. It is warm and capable and reliable and generous. It is a real part of who you are. But it is not all of who you are. Behind it, and Jung was very clear about this, behind every strong persona lives the part that didn't get to rest, the part that has been waiting quietly for someone who would look past the capable surface and say, I see you, not just the strength, all of it. There is a person in the world, perhaps already in your world, perhaps approaching the edges of it, who senses this about you, not because you've told them, you haven't told anyone, not really, not the full version, but because certain people carry a particular quality of perception that goes beneath the surface of things. Jung called it feeling-type consciousness, the capacity to receive emotional information that isn't being transmitted through words, to sense the contours of another person's inner life through proximity, through attention, through the kind of sustained, genuine interest that most people only direct toward what's immediately useful to them. This person looks at you and feels something they can't quite organize into language. It's a pull, not a simple attraction, though that may be there too. Something more structural than attraction. Something that feels less like, I want to be with you, and more like, I don't want you to have to carry that alone anymore. They notice things, the almost imperceptible shift in your energy at the end of a long day. The way your smile, which is genuine and warm and reaches your eyes, doesn't quite reach the place behind your eyes where the older tiredness lives. The way you redirect conversations away from yourself with such practiced ease that most people don't even notice it happening. The way you ask about others, genuinely, with real interest, partly because you care, and partly because being the one who asks means you don't have to be the one who's asked. They notice, and what they feel when they notice is not pity. I want to be very clear about that, because pity would be unbearable to you, and you would know it immediately, and you would close the door. What they feel is something older and more specific than pity. What they feel is a kind of tender outrage on your behalf, a quiet fury at the fact that someone with your depth of capacity for love and your genuine warmth and your particular hard-won wisdom has been spending it in directions that don't return it, has been giving to a world that has been, on balance, taking. And underneath that feeling is something that surprises even them, a longing to be the place where that changes. Now, I need to pause here and tell you something that the competitor scripts in this genre will never tell you, because they are too busy making you feel good to tell you anything true. Jung also wrote about something he called the savior complex, and it is important, genuinely important, not as a warning that this love isn't real, but as a distinction that will help you recognize whether what someone offers you is love or whether it is something more complicated. The savior complex says, I am drawn to your pain because fixing your pain will make me feel purposeful, because rescuing you will make me feel needed, because if I can be the one who heals you, then I have value. Then I matter. The Savior wants to take your pain away, not primarily for your sake, but for what the taking will give them. The sense of being necessary, the identity of the healer, the particular power that comes with being someone's salvation. This is not love. It is a form of need wearing love's clothing, and it often targets the same women, the strong ones, the capable ones, the ones who carry things quietly, because those women represent a particular kind of challenge. If she doesn't need rescuing, the savior must work harder, must prove themselves, must manufacture a crisis or amplify an existing one in order to remain relevant. The person who truly longs to be with you in order to ease your pain, the person Jung would recognize as genuinely whole enough to offer this, is different in one crucial way. They are not drawn to your pain. They are drawn to you. The pain is simply something they refuse to look away from, something they refuse to pretend isn't there, something they want to stand alongside. Not because it makes them feel important, but because leaving you to stand in it alone is something they find genuinely unconscionable. The distinction matters, because you deserve to be loved by someone who would love you just as fiercely if you had no pain at all, who is choosing you, the full, complicated, layered, occasionally difficult, always worthwhile you, and not choosing the version of you that needs them. Hold that distinction somewhere safe. You'll need it. Let me tell you what this person actually sees when they look at you, not what they project onto you, not what they imagine or hope or construct out of their own longing, what they actually see because they've been paying the kind of attention that most people don't pay. They see the generosity that has sometimes been mistaken for not having needs of your own. They see the loyalty that has sometimes been returned with inconsistency. They see the way you love, which is deep and considered and not at all casual. And they see the particular ache of someone who has loved that way in contexts that couldn't hold it, couldn't receive it at the depth at which it was offered. They see the disappointments you've metabolized quietly, the relationships that asked you to make yourself smaller in order to fit inside them. The people who were drawn to your strength but frightened by your depth. The connections that felt real right up until the moment they revealed themselves as something more fragile than you believed. They see what that has cost you. Not in your capability is intact, more than intact, but in that softer interior place, the place that once believed without reservation, the place that has learned, through the very reasonable logic of accumulated evidence, to hold something back. To love at a slight angle. To keep one part of yourself just slightly out of reach, just in case. Jung called this the wound to Eros. The damage that happens to our capacity for full, unreserved connection when that capacity is met repeatedly with something that couldn't receive it. It is not bitterness. It is not cynicism. It is a very intelligent, very understandable calibration of the heart. And the person who longs to marry you sees it. They see the calibration. They see the careful, slight angle. And they do not resent it or try to override it or demand that you immediately dismantle it as proof of trust. They understand why it's there. They know what it cost you to develop it. And they are prepared to be patient, genuinely, sustainedly, without a secret deadline patient, while it slowly becomes unnecessary. That is what it looks like when someone loves you from a place of wholeness rather than need. They do not rush your opening. They create conditions where opening gradually becomes possible. They show up with the same quality of presence on the ordinary Tuesday as on the day they first told you how they felt. They make consistency so normal that the part of you braced for its absence eventually has nothing to brace against. Jung believed that the deepest function of committed love, the kind that chooses permanence, that says, "Marry me," and means I am choosing this in full knowledge of what choosing this means, is not happiness, not in the simple sense. He was not romantic in the naive way. He had studied too much of the human shadow to believe that love was uncomplicated. What he believed was that the deepest function of committed love is integration. The bringing together of the parts of ourselves we've shown the world and the parts we've kept hidden. The marriage, literal and psychological, of the strong self and the soft self, of the capable self and the frightened self, of the self that has held everything together and the self that is, underneath all that holding, a person who also needs to be held. Most of us spend our lives keeping those selves separate. The world meets the capable one. The private one stays private, sometimes even from ourselves. We develop such fluency in the persona that we occasionally forget it's a persona. We lose track of the full version of ourselves. We forget what it felt like before we learned that the full version wasn't always safe to show. A person who longs to marry you in the way we're describing today is not just offering you companionship. They are offering you something Jung considered one of the most profound gifts one human being can give another, the specific safety in which integration becomes possible, in which you are allowed to be the full version, in which the capable self and the soft self can finally exist in the same room, with the same person at the same time, without one of them having to go away. That is what it means to have your pain acknowledged without it being made into your identity. You are not your wounds. You are not your exhaustion. You are not the accumulated cost of all the times you gave without receiving. You are infinitely more than that. But you are also, honestly, a person who carries those things. And love that refuses to see that. Love that only wants the bright, capable, giving version and looks away from the rest, is not love that knows you. The person who longs to marry you wants to know you, all of you. And in that knowing, they are offering you something you may have stopped believing was available, the particular rest of being fully seen and being fully chosen at the same time. I want to speak now to the part of you that isn't sure, the part that has read this far and felt something, felt it genuinely, felt it in that place below the chest where real recognition lands, and is simultaneously trying to talk itself out of it. I know that part. I want to address her directly. She is not wrong to be careful. She has her reasons, and they are good ones, and they were earned. She is not broken for being guarded. She is not damaged for having learned to protect herself. She is not failing at love because she holds something back. She is simply someone who has learned through actual experience, not through anxiety or imagination, that not every person who approaches with warmth intends to stay. Not every person who says they want to know you is prepared for what knowing you actually requires. She learned that. She paid for the lesson. She carries it. And what I want to say to her, carefully, without dismissing anything she knows, is this. Her protection has served her, and it may be costing her now. Not because it was wrong. It was right when it was built. It was the right response to the conditions that existed at the time, but conditions change. People are not all the same. The evidence of the past is real evidence, but it is not the only evidence available. Jung wrote that the greatest tragedy of a defended heart is not that it keeps pain out. It is that it keeps everything out. That in the very act of protecting itself from what hurt it before, it also, without intending to, without wanting to, becomes less available to what could heal it. The opening is the terrifying part, not the loving. The opening, the moment of allowing someone past the careful management, the moment of letting the full version emerge, tired and complicated and hopeful and scared and still after everything capable of an enormous depth of feeling and trusting that what comes back won't be the same thing that came back before. That moment will come. It comes for every defended heart eventually, not as an event, not as a decision made once and finished, but as a series of small choices, choosing one more time to be a little more honest, to hold back a little less, to allow the quiet Tuesday evening with this person to mean something, instead of managing it into meaninglessness to keep yourself safe. Each small choice teaches the nervous system something. It accumulates. It creates, slowly, an interior knowledge that this time is different. Not because someone promised it would be, but because their actions have been quietly and consistently different. Here is what a marriage built on this kind of love actually looks like. Not in the fantasy, not in the beautiful wedding version, but in the ordinary, which is where all real love eventually lives. It looks like someone who notices when you're carrying more than usual before you've said anything, who doesn't immediately try to solve it because they know you well enough to know that sometimes you don't want solving, sometimes you want witnessed, but who makes their presence available and lets you decide what you need. It looks like shared silence that feels like rest rather than tension. The specific relief of being in a room with someone and not having to perform, not having to be interesting or capable or engaging, just being a person in a room next to another person, and that being enough. It looks like someone who remembers the small things you mentioned once in passing, without emphasis, who brings them back to you later as evidence that they were paying attention when you weren't even aware you were worth paying attention to. It looks like disagreement that doesn't threaten the foundation, conflict that is navigated toward resolution rather than weaponized toward winning. A person who can hold space for your anger, your frustration, your fear, your occasional irrationality, without that meaning anything catastrophic about the relationship, without you needing to immediately manage yourself back into palatability. It looks like your nervous system, after years of bracing, slowly learning to put itself down. Like your body finally understanding that the waiting for the other shoe to drop can stop. Like waking up in the morning and noticing in some quiet, cellular way that the low-level vigilance you've carried for so long is no longer necessary here. That is not a small thing. That is not a modest promise. That is, in Jung's understanding of human development, one of the most significant things that can happen to a person. The healing that occurs not in therapy, not in solitude, not in personal development, but in safe, sustained, genuine love. In the particular medicine of being known and being chosen and being stayed for, you have been strong for a very long time. You have carried things without complaint that other people would have set down. You have given generously to a world that has not always been careful with what you gave. You have kept your heart open, soft, still capable of hoping, still capable of loving fully, despite everything that has given you reason to close it. That is not weakness. That is an extraordinary form of courage, the courage of someone who has been hurt and who has refused, again and again, to let the hurt become her whole story. The person who longs to marry you sees that courage, not the performance of it, the actual thing, the real cost of it, what it has taken from you, what it has built in you, the particular beauty of someone who has been through something genuine and come out the other side, not hardened, but deepened. They don't want to take your strength from you. They don't want to replace your independence or your capability or your hard-won self-sufficiency. They want to stand beside all of that. And to be the one place in your life where you don't have to deploy it constantly, where you can set it down sometimes, where you can be, without apology, the version of yourself that is also occasionally uncertain and tired and in need of being cared for. Jung believed that wholeness is not the elimination of vulnerability, it is the integration of it, the capacity to be both strong and soft in the same body, in the same life, with the same person, and for that person to hold both with equal tenderness. What is being offered to you, what this person longs to offer, what they are already, perhaps quietly, already extending in your direction, is the specific love that makes that integration possible, not a rescue, not a salvation, not someone who will take your pain away and leave you somehow diminished by the taking, a witness, a companion, someone who will sit in the pain with you until it gradually, on its own terms, in its own time, begins to lift, and who will be there, not watching from a distance, not waiting for the easier version of you to return, but there, beside you, through all of it. You have waited a long time for someone who could hold all of you. Perhaps you are closer to that than you know. Perhaps the question is not whether this love exists. Perhaps the question is whether you are ready, slowly and on your own terms, to let it in.